public company. Have my own startup. I've been part of a startup that was acquired before. And like you mentioned, I was 4 years in the intelligence unit in the Israeli army. And so, there's a very different ways of manage and operate, people and work. And as you can imagine, a startup life, a public company life, and an army life are quite different. But funny enough, they're all very similar in the same way, because they're all about people. And it doesn't matter if you have a manager, a co-founder, or a commander. At the end of the day, moving forward, creating progress, and using technology still needs to go through people, and still needs to align with what people care about. And so, going through those things, was very clear to me that something is missing in enterprise software. And that's kind of where Tonkean is. But we'll talk about Tonkean at the end of this session as well. But I think we'll spend the majority of it, or at least the bigger first half, on just change management as a whole.
Perfect. I like if anyone knows me, Sagi, I like to personalize things. I get them to know one another. But today's topic, from fighting fires to driving impact, Sagi is going to bring us on a journey like innovating without change management. And just to look at the agenda really quick, he's going to jump in. We give him the opening remarks, the keynote. We're going to do about a 1-minute demo, keep it quick, and then open it for Q&A and any closing remarks at the end. But, with that, Sagi, I'm going to let you take it off.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I think we're actually going to start with a quick survey or a poll. We're talking here about managing change and the cost of change management, and obviously we're focusing on legal. And so, from the people that attended today, would love to hear what is the percentage of cases where an initiative or a project literally got scrapped or been massively delayed due to the amount of change that was required. So just a small pulse check would go a long way here. So maybe give 20 seconds for people to answer. The small dance, yeah.
I think people have it up to here with voting,
Yeah, something like that. You do what you have to do with those strange times.
So, can you see it live right now?
I guess I can only if I submit myself.
So I can share the results right now.
Yep, perfect. Okay, so yeah, it looks like it's actually across the map. The list amount is where it didn't impact at all, right? And so I think that what we've usually seen across the board, different audiences, is that actually 40-50% mark is where a lot of the project fall through. And so that basically means, even if you go on the lower hand, if 1 out of 3 projects is being jeopardized because of the amount of change needed, it means that we probably can improve the way that we designed the project to begin with, to include change. And so that's kind of where I wanna take everyone in. So the first thing that I think is important to kind of talk about is priorities. And a lot of times, in life, but definitely, in work, priorities are what drives decisions. And so when you think about legal specifically, is this inherent conflict, in a way, between what it means to drive the business forward. So, being a business partner, and drive the top level of business metrics, but also doing what we're actually hired to do, which is managing the risk and exposure for the business, right? And so those two so many times are conflicting. And when you think about what it takes to actually create impact, or drive innovation, we found that this is harder than it should be, and a lot of the business processes are still manual. And this is something that ties back directly to that change management that we'll touch on in a second, which is why are there so manual? Going back to calling point earlier of my experience and coming from the army and going to a startup and going to a big company and back to a startup, I realized something that sort of made me go in this journey was that business process is actually not about data. They're about people. And that small and simple concept is actually not trivial, because a lot of the work we do, when you think about contract processes, risk management processes, handling requests, we always tend to think about, and maybe driven to think about, designing the process and using technology around it from the eyes of what is the data that is being handled, where does it need to go to, and so on and so forth. And not enough times we're realizing the dependency, that the deep dependency that we have inside of the process of the people, and that the people in the process are actually can be in multiple departments and multiple areas and are very, very different. And something I like to say a lot is that there's a difference between the ROI of an individual and the ROI of the organization. So as a team, as a company, as an organization, we might have some goal and some metric where we go and invest, right? So the ROI is return over the investment that we're measuring ourselves for, and the reason we're changing the process. But that doesn't mean that it will align with the ROI of the individual. And so that's a big part of it, and we'll touch further on that in a second. But the second point here, which goes side by side with it, is the fact that every business is extremely unique, and every process is actually very personalized. So even if everyone in the audience here has an NDA process involved, it actually might be not that similar. It might have the same concept, the same sort of high-level goals and mechanisms, but the details of, like, when do we auto-approve an NDA? Where do we use our paper, their paper? Who are the people that usually request an NDA? Why do we even need an NDA? What are the type of parties we're working on? All of those are very derived by the type of business you do, the type of culture you have, the industries you work in, and so on and so forth. So that even that simple process seems trivial, is very unique for every company. And then, if that's not enough, the way that we work was mistreated from the impact each department has on the entire business. And this just to say that I've been part of it too, right? We are in a silo of our own world, because there's so much to do and there's so much to work on, and most businesses work that way. So every department are running their own sort of lane, and the handoffs between them is sometimes complete different tools, complete different priorities, complete different even culture or social sort of like standards, that really drives the communication to be heavy on manual back and forth over email and stuff like that. So when you think about legal, in this case, we might buy different software and different tech to help with our internal needs. But if we are taking that NDA example, if we only think about what is the value for legal by automating an NDA or by standardizing an NDA process, we're completely missing the mark. Because if sales in this example are the one that asking for NDAs, what do they need in order to get the NDA faster? What do they expect? If finance needs later, for the diligence to have those NDAs organized somewhere, how do they map that? And so on and so forth. And this is obviously, NDA is just an example, but this can be any contract, any process, and it's not unique to legal, which means that every process in every department is not actually lives in a silo. It's part of a bigger operational end-to-end that actually spans across. And if we don't design it that way, if we're not aware of it, and we don't have the right tool sets to do that, then we actually find that we spend a lot of money and a lot of effort in trying to solve a process with a very, very low results at the end of it, because we were designing it when we were ignoring all the different people that are involved, and therefore uh, pay the tax on the actual handoff. An obvious example for me is, a lot of you obviously spend a lot of times at one point creating a legal portal, and thinking, hey, instead of having all of those legal requests coming in randomly into our email, let's have a legal portal. Everyone in the organization would be able to look for the information they need, fill forms and all that stuff. This is great idea for a knowledge management perspective, but where it's lacking is the actual intake itself. If an engineer manager need a request about an employee agreement somewhere in the company, or a partner need an information, or a salesperson need a contract or an MSA or an NDA, whatever it is, those people have different front doors. They have different reasoning. The part in their life that needs the contract or working with legal is very different between themselves and with what legal lives day in, day out. The change management tax come from not being able to prioritize and design the solution to work with those people. And so, again, a little bit more visual example into where we see those happening. But that's just one example. This actually, in this slide, I have 40 different processes that are all aligned and intertwined. And this is just because how much I could fit into this one slide. There's probably hundreds of those, and they span across different departments and different times within life cycle of a business, but they're all intertwined. And if we live in a silo, if we're not realizing the relationship, that's when we're paying heavy tax on scale, on efficiency, and on change. And that's kind of sort of lead me to the last part of this section, which is, what are the alternatives, right? So what we're finding from a lot of work we did with a lot of companies and our understanding of the market is, when you think about how do you create alignment, there's actually not a really good answer. You can try to do what 10, 20 years ago people were pushing for. Hey, let's put everyone under the same place, under the same space, under the same application. The Salesforce and the Oracles and the SAPs of the world definitely provide alignment on the data side of things, but it's very hard to fit to every individual need. And that's, again, going back to the difference between data and people, right? And so when people are working their day-to-day workflows, they have unique needs that will cater to their ability to be more productive. And that created a situation where, when SaaS came out, fill that void, everyone buy their own single app. If you have a slightly different UI that you want, a slightly different logic that you want, to go ahead and buy a new application and a new SaaS application, because one single app just doesn't work. It doesn't fit everyone's individual need. The second option would be, okay, you want something specific, you want something tailor-made, let's build it for you. So the bigger companies has access of engineering resources, and they always prefer to build versus buy. But that's actually a shortcoming too. If you build something, first of all, it's more expensive, obviously, but then you take away from the things that you might are going to be more core to your business and your skill set and specialities. But it also results in the same problem of buying one single app, because by the time this build thing is done, the requirement might change, the environment change, and so now you're again in a short, coming short on what the people actually need in order to create and be productive. And so that's not a scalable solution as well. The third option is a very, very common, is, okay, all I need is connecting the data. And I think by now it's clear my position, in which the data is great, it's important, but it's not enough. And if you want to visualize it, even when you connect, let's say, your CRM with your CLM, with your finance ERP, whatever it is, you're still finding that a lot of the work happens in email or in chat, a lot of the back and forth. Because creating the ticket is not the problem. The problem is, how do I triage it correctly, handle it correctly? What happens if there's missing information? I need to go back to the person. How urgent this is. I don't have the visibility. I don't have the context. Again, going back to the point that it's not about putting the data around, it's about orchestration of a process that is across different departments. And that sort of leads to the last point, which is what this entire webinar is about: changing people behavior. Right? If I can change the tools, if I can change the requirement, then maybe I can force people into a new behavior. Sometime you should do it. Right? You should not try to hold on to a bad process. If the process is bad, you should probably change it. But sometimes the reason why you're trying to change a process is not because that part of the process is necessarily bad. You're trying to change it because you don't have a visibility. You're trying to change it because some areas of it are taking longer than usual, taking more resources than they should. That doesn't mean that the inherent process is bad. And forcing change on everyone is not only very expensive, sometimes it's not even possible. And according to your guys' votes, it looks like there's a consensus of at least 20% or 30% of the cases, it hurts the project so much that the project might never happen. So managing change is actually a core problem here. And so what can we do? And that sort of like touches on a lot of those problems. So this is I think was the previous poll. This is a new poll, right? So before I jump into sort of what is the some ideas of what can you do, right? I want to make those sessions as actionable as possible. Let's do a quick pulse check on what is the things that you guys found to be most that if you try the most, when you're trying to create alignment. Was it moving everyone to the same app? Was it creating homegrown solutions, connecting all the data, or was it just relying on changing people behavior? So let's give 10 seconds for that, and then we can continue. Okay, so this actually turned out to be not a lot of people voted, but quite all over the place, which is quite aligned with what we've seen, and all of them are usually not good enough. So as we go back to the slides, what can we do? So there's actually 4 things I wanna touch on, and some of them are things you can do tomorrow and doesn't require. They're more of a conceptual change into how we think about change, but also some of them are a little bit more designing and investing differently in the technology stack and in the methodologies that we use in order to create innovation and change within legal. So the first one is actually something we call people first process design, and it's this concept that came really early when we started Tonkean as what is the actual gap. And when we think about the ROI of the company versus the ROI of the individual, that's actually where this comes in. So this is actually empty, purposefully empty, because it's more of like this simple, very easy concept of how to design a process people first. And we call it the 2-pillar approach. We actually have a white paper on this if anyone is interested. But the idea is very straightforward. When you design a process, when you have right now projects on your plan to change, you know what the reasoning from the company perspective, you know what the business impact is. Otherwise, you wouldn't do this project to begin with. make a stand into creating another column next to it, writing down who are the different personas across the board that would need to participate in this, and ask yourself, why should they care? Like, what's their own um, part of this, and what drives them in as part of this process? Because you'll find that you might have a couple of them already in your head when you were thinking about this, but there might be a long tail of several more that you didn't actually think through what it would mean to them. And all of a sudden you're realizing that person, Joe or whatever, doesn't actually touch this process more than once a month. And so actually expecting them to log in and to learn how to use, this new system or this new form or this new whatever approach, is more likely to not happen as well as you want. And maybe that becomes a bottleneck into your ability to create velocity. So this simple approach we've seen so many times create all of a sudden these new insights that are easy to do and can be very impactful in the success of the project. Next is somewhat sort of derivated by thinking people first, but is actually a little bit mind shift into how we think about technology. We got used to think, definitely in the last 10 years, but that's been around for a while, even in the consumer world, with iPhone and Android, whatever, to think in the language of apps. I have something that I need to solve, there's an app for that. I have this gap, let me look for a vendor for that. That idea is true for some cases. In cases you need a very deep expertise on a certain matter, but it's actually pretty bad practice for everything else. And understanding that that not every solution means a new application would actually free you into thinking about what is the ROI of the people. And there's plenty of ways to do that today, and this is more than just sort of like what we stand for, but the ability to think through, what is the relationship between the different departments, what tools do I already have, and how can I leverage them more to fit what I need, and customize some of them to do more, versus going the easy way out of buying something that is prepackaged, right? A lot of times we're like, oh, I don't want to mess with this. I just prefer to buy this thing that is already built for that. But when companies charge you per user, their incentive is to have more people using it, which means their incentive is that more users within the company would change their ways in order to learn this new application. And so it shouldn't be shocking to anyone why and I think Gartner came up with those numbers, but why the average knowledge worker today spends work across 200 applications, within their week. And so it's crazy, and 60 plus within a day, something crazy that when you actually put it into number, it's ridiculous. Can we limit that? Can we shrink that time into focus on actual high value work? Limiting the number of interfaces is actually critical. So that is very connected to that first point, because when you know what people care about, then you can actually optimize to the tools that they already have. The next one is actually about dependencies. And for me, dependency, the opposite of dependencies is empowerment. So how do I actually reduce the IT and dev dependency and empower the rest of the organization to move faster? All the while, obviously, going back to that previous point, understanding what do IT care about and then what the business cares about. Something that we didn't came up with. This is a trend that has been going on for a while now. Is that concept of no code or low code, it's the concept of configuration and the concept of adapting into some of the existing software and tools. But it's really all about, to me, investing in operation teams. And obviously, a lot of the people in the audience are from our legal operators and in those legal ops teams. But that's true, by the way, on all the different operation teams, whether it's sales operations, marketing operations, finance operations, HR operations, and of course, legal operations. Investing and empowering the operation teams is critical in order to being able to get that speed and reduce that dependency. And so what it means to me is, what are the things that I can invest in? And those can be, like I said, technology, but it can also be training, and it can be, who are we adding to the team? How are we staffing the operation team? How can I create a situation in which the operation teams has what they need in order to own the logic and own the process, while maintaining the IT team with the control and standardization and stability which they care about. And so that concept is less of one thing you can do. You can do a lot of things, but thinking as a leader of how I can continuously invest, small and big, into enabling my operation teams, and by reducing that dependency, is going to be critical in your ability to reduce change management and create innovation later. So that is, from a high level, a lot of actions that we've helped companies with and seen companies with and learned from companies that worked for them. And that's something that, I've seen in my own eyes make a huge difference. The fourth one speaks a little bit about what we do as a company as well. But before I go there, maybe Colin, if you want to jump in real quick, and because you have a lot of experience in this, and so I can go back to the slide that sort of like summarize this, and maybe share a little bit of what you've seen, and whether you've seen those type of things work before.
Yeah, so just kind of listening to your last points, like I just kind of see like what you're offering, like, is an efficiencies of scale, like, your solution, what you're aiming for, in my eyes, is I particularly look at legal operations through four lenses when I'm building out a new function there. I'm looking at the process. What is the process to the business? What is the process with outside counsel? How am I intaking and triaging information? How can I do that smoothly and effectively? My thought process at this point is like, where do I automate? Where can I automate? Where can I communicate better? How do I standardize certain documents? Is there a workaround solution? When can I use like what if then logic scenarios to kind of create more efficiencies where I'm not touching documents for high volume, low risk stuff, and moving it efficiently across the legal department and the rest of the business. And the next thing, I'm looking at adoption of technologies, which is always like a big change management thing, right? So I feel like you're speaking to something that are like massive pain points within legal to begin with. The other thing is like the spend optimization, right? It's like you're looking across all these all these process communications documents. You're able to move resources efficiently into the right places, right? So you're kind of legal spend management. You know where to hire. You know how to deal with outside counsel. You got better. You got more time to deal on your billing. So I see, in theory, what I'm seeing, what this does, it solves a lot of the problems. And not only that, it manages and measures everything across the process, what you're doing, if there's any blips, so that's, that's just my take, from what I've had the demo for 20 minutes. I've talked to folks that use you, and, and your presentation, I'm just trying to surmise it, but that's my thoughts. I see it as a massive value add and reducing those dependencies on IT is it's been the bane of my existence for the past 10 years, like putting big enterprise solutions in, being SOC 2 compliant,
Yeah.
and then looking for everything to be done by IT if you need to configure 6 radio buttons, which could take
Yeah.
you 3 months to get approval. And I'm not kidding when I say that, right? So
Yeah, I've heard companies that IT literally charge them money, like $60,000 to change a configuration, and it's gonna take them a month.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen it all. So yeah, that is a great point, and thank you for jumping in, and actually thank you for the segue, because that's kind of where I wanted to, and I know a lot of people joining wanted to hear a little bit more about Tonkean too, and what we offer, and so. Um, for me, there's this concept of orchestration, and it's that blanket that you would put on in an empower legal operation, for example, to control their own destiny, control the logic, connect to existing systems, and so on. And so this is something we call an adaptive business operation, because the point is being adaptive, and the point is improving business operations. And so Tonkean is basically a platform that is purposely built for operation teams and allow them to orchestrate the mix of people, processes, and systems. And so it's really about how do I think about the process, how do I think about the people in them, but how do I think also about the tools that I already have? How do I enable all of this with no code, so people, the operation teams can actually be the one leading the charge versus needing to rely on engineering. But if I do that, and if I do that the right way, then I actually can create new processes, new efficiencies, and innovation without changing anyone's behavior, or very minimum, into a point that a person that still they want to sit in their CRM, they can still do that. Person that want to live in Outlook or in email can continue to do that. You can work with external parties, you can work with internal parties, and all of that without forcing anyone to a new UI and a new application. And so that's sort of like where we strive for. So to touch on a few of those points really quickly, Tonkean basically allows you to first and foremost connect with the existing tools and data. So this can be anything from your applications you use every day, like your CLM, your CRM, your ERP, your HR systems, whatever it is that is needed, compliance systems. Or it can also be databases and spreadsheets. It can be a custom internal tools that are built internally in-house. Tonkean is able to connect to all of those in a secure manner, and there's a lot of encryption and privacy controls that IT loves, because it gives them control over what is accessible and by who. But that's kind of where their job is ending. The second part of it, which is as important, is the ability to connect with the people. And so if we talk about change management or reducing or removing change management, it's all about reaching people wherever they are at the right time. And so the ability to coordinate with people, so knowing when to follow up, how much to nag someone, what to do when someone is not answering. Should I escalate it, or how urgent is this thing is, and being able to work over email or over chat like Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Chat, and so on. It's a very, very key part of handling complex human-centric processes like legal have. And so being able to connect to the data from one hand, but then being able to execute approval cycles that are just goes hand to hand, and then go back to make some more actions automatically. It's a big part of what you can do with Tonkean. All of this eventually has to be built on some sort of a workflow. And so Tonkean is, like I said earlier, is 100% no code, which means that the workflow, the way you build the workflow, the way you manage the workflow is actually done by the operation teams. And there's a lot of abstractions that we added there that remove complexities from what usually is being done in those scenarios. So we don't even talk about if this then that. We talk about in cases like when something happened due, because human-centric processes are not linear. They might happen in different times, and a lot of the complexity that comes with managing data, like mapping data and so on, are completely automated in Tonkean. So I won't have the time to go through all of this, but the takeaway should be this is built purposefully for operation teams. So this is the first time that that we build 100%. Someone built 100% no code. There is no way to write code. So it's not like, oh, you can do most things, but then if you want to do something complex, you have to write scripts for it. That's not the case. The only way to build things in Tonkean is by this drag and drop. And so we spend a lot of time and effort into optimizing for what the level of if you know how to use formulas in Excel spreadsheet and pivot tables, then you're well equipped to build things and maintain them with Tonkean. The last part, but definitely not least, is Colin, you mentioned something about that, is the ability to have visibility to it. Because orchestrating a process doesn't only mean executing actions or coordinating actions. It's also about creating this standardization and visibility. If you think about like if I compare it to a factory, right? It's like having an assembly line. The assembly line doesn't only allow things to go through in a certain rate and in the right flow, it also creates visibility into now being able to optimize it. So for example, how long does it take us to handle a certain contract request? How long does it take? How many times this department asks us these questions? How many times the things are stuck on outside console or whatever it is, right? So the visibility to it to be cross-functional and across different tools and departments is something that is key in order to create velocity, and therefore part of what we define as orchestration. And so just to summarize this and then go, and we can show a quick demo that we prepared, because I want to leave enough time for Q&A, is those four pillars is what we define as an orchestration platform, an adaptive business operation platform. One is the ability to orchestrate the process with no code. So no code is extremely important to empower the teams. The ability to connect to existing systems is what allows us that concept of not introducing new interfaces, not introducing new applications, reducing change management because of that as well. But the real sort of like pivotal point about no change management means that if people only need to interact with email, let's have them interact with email. And I don't mean email notifications, I mean actual interactions. So they can reply to the thread in natural language, they can actually work the way they used to work with a person. It's only now that this doesn't have to be done by a lawyer that has a lot more important things to do than replying to random email request or question. And then the last, again, is that concept of the end-to-end visibility, and that's what actually finally allow us to break the silos and see through the end-to-end operation and improve that over time. With that, I think we prepared a quick demo video just from the sake of time. It's a couple minutes, and I think it would show us, and I can overlay a little bit of a voiceover too. But we'll take one of examples around legal document generation and kind of touch to some of those ideas, and most importantly, how this is not a change management, doesn't require change management if you do it that way.
Hey there, wanted to do a quick demo on how we make legal and sales teams work faster together. Legal teams, they have a bunch of documents they want to keep in their folders. They have their templates that they want to keep maintained. Sales teams, they work in Salesforce. You don't want them to constantly bug the legal teams for where the latest document is or sending the latest NDA out, for example. So we built this little module here. It's going to monitor the account object in Salesforce. And anytime the account object has its legal document not empty, it's going to go ahead and create the account folder within the repository that we showed you earlier. From there, it's going to create the different documents that the sales rep has requested, and given some parameters, it's going to go ahead and ping the legal Slack channel if there's some things that they need to ask for. So let's go ahead and do that first part right now. I'm going to go ahead and just create a new account here. Let's just call this one Acme Comp. And we're going to ask for an NDA and an MSA as part of this Acme company. Now, right away, what you're going to see, we're going to look at the item being created. Then we're going to generate the folder. So if you see here, very quickly, you saw it appear right here. And then it's going to go ahead, check to see what documents were checked, look at the templates that were in the original folder, and then start populating them here as I talk. And as I open one of these documents up, you can see it's pulling the data from the Salesforce account record. Now, what's really cool is we can offer some human in the loop features. So if I, for example, have revenue greater than $1 million, I can just add more conditions here if I was the legal team to say, what if employees are greater than 1,000, for example? Then I can go ahead and ping the legal team. But other than that, you can see that over here, we're going to inform the sales team, the Slack channel, of the various documents over here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Slack channel that just popped up. And it has all the links to the documents that I selected, the NDA and the MSA. And I have additional options to send forms, send the NDA to DocuSign, do a whole bunch of stuff in the workflow over here. So as you can see here, the legal team, they stay in their preferred application, whether it's their document repository where they manage their templates and documents. And the sales team, they get to stay in their Salesforce and their Slack. And here we have zero code. We're able to modify things on the fly. And for the Slack channel, people are given extra options to all the documents and processes they have later on. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we look forward to hearing you all. Thanks again.
So that was a quick preview, of the type of things that Tonkean can do. The important part there was, we're able to connect to the different systems that already exist, like Salesforce, and in this case was Google Drive, but could have been any CLM, old or new, to generate the actual documents, but also the communication channels themselves, right? So maybe sales work in Salesforce, like to communicate in Slack, maybe in Chatter within Salesforce, maybe legal like to work in email or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. The ability to connect to everyone and streamline the process through this flow without actually introducing new applications is key. But also the entire UI where you saw the flow diagram is completely no code, and that is what it is. There is no behind the scenes other than that. That's building blocks is what actually allows you to come up with automations and efficiencies on top of the tools that you already have, and improve the process that might be broken. So with that, I think we have a little bit more time to have some questions, Q&A. So I welcome questions.
Yeah, a quick question came in from Ham Mai. Are there best practices for legal operations to follow with building out modules in Tonkean?
Yeah, so we have multiple. Obviously, you can visit the website and take a look at our legal section. We have a lot of examples there and a lot of templates you can play with as well, and videos to watch that are even more in depth than the one we saw there. You can download our ebook, and we're very strong on improving legal tech as general, and so we have a lot of content and things we're building as we work with a lot of big brands, and then we also have product bi-weekly product demos, and so there's a legal one coming up, and I think we're gonna follow up with everyone that joined with a link, so you're be able to join that as well if you want a deeper dive into specific legal, where you can also look at some of the demos, some of the things in the product.
Perfect. A question coming in from Maxwell Chin. Looks cool, but I can see IT being an obvious hurdle here, especially when connecting to multiple systems and such. Or IT wants this to have say in technology that our company uses. When you say no code, am I correct in understanding IT will set this up and then we can use Tonkean without IT or code?
Yeah, so actually, funny enough, we found IT to be a friend, and IT actually loves us in a lot of times. We don't see this as a one-way street. We see it as a bridge between the business operations and IT/engineering. And so actually what happens is, if you think about it from the IT perspective, what they care about is stability, they care about best practices, they care about standardization, they care about access control. We are SOC 2 and, highly security, Colin, you mentioned most of my team is actually from the intelligence unit in the Army. We understand security very well. And so we passed the most rigid security reviews that actually exist. We work with healthcare companies and financial companies and big tech companies. And so from that perspective, we've been vetted, but from even a conceptual perspective, IT right now, a lot of times, or engineering are a bottleneck, and they don't want to be a bottleneck. They want to enable and empower too, if they can force standardization and they can force best practices. So the way we are built, and as we sort of like share the information with the IT and involve them in a demo as well, sometimes they're getting very excited because we enable a lot of best practices for how to build things that are mission critical and are scalable, but for a business user. So you, Colin, and team are not necessarily learned all the best practices of how to develop software and how to develop scalable technology, but you don't actually need to be worried about that as you build in Tonkean, because Tonkean will enforce it behind the scene. So this is something that is very exciting for IT as part of this.
So just a follow-up question from Han. Like, if somebody's to get started with Tonkean, like what kind of, how long does it take, and what skill level does a legal person need?
So first of all, actually, if I separate this question into two different things, if the power of Tonkean is enabling that sort of adaptiveness. So let's assume for a second you do have Tonkean, building a new workflow or what we call modules, or changing existing modules is a matter of minutes or hours to deploy changes. It's very quick. We had customers that were able to react to COVID, where all of a sudden they have new processes that requires new patients requests, or customers that we have that had heavy automation with Tonkean around external facing customer requests. We're able to spin off new automations and new logic within hours, within 2-3 hours, and all of a sudden they have now a new business process that is working. So once you're in, it's very, very, very easy and very fast. As a new prospect, it really depends on how how rigid your environment is. Our fastest installations were in couple of weeks. Our longest one are a couple of months, and so it's actually quite fast, assuming that you can bring the right people to the room. And so if the legal operation teams is excited and we can bring in the IT or corp engineering, whoever holds the keys early enough, and get them excited about this being a bridge, then that can move very quickly with a matter of weeks.
Cool. Question coming in from Benny. Thanks for the question, Benny. What legal ops customers do you already have?
Well, I can't necessarily share a lot of the names. We have some of them in the website. We have some case studies. But Google, for example, would join us next week on Clock and would share some of their experience with Tonkean. And so, we're very fortunate with the type of companies that chose to work with us, and we've able to solve a lot of complex problems in a very simple manner. I think the exciting part is when legal ops starting to use Tonkean and start to orchestrate those processes across the different departments. And I'm seeing in the chat that there's continuous questions there.
There's good follow-up questions from Benny and Maxwell. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I think the next question from Benny is about, can it work with different business units like sales and marketing and finance to implement? And actually what we find is that there's a very little dependency that you need, so you don't have to involve them, but you actually a lot of times want to involve them, because that sort of becomes this standardized system for legal ops to work with sales ops. So all of a sudden they now have a shared place to work on that process of, let's say, contract intake in a way that is really optimized for both departments. But like I said earlier, the power of Tonkean is that you don't have to do that. You can decide that, if people want to continue to send emails into legal@company.com, you can let them continue to do that and build a Tonkean workflow modules that actually take care of that. And so it's completely transparent to everyone else that there's a Tonkean behind the scene that handles requests. And so most people in the company would never even know that Tonkean exists, but in fact, it would take a big part of all the processes that they're participating in. They won't even know it. And so you can definitely involve them and we've seen this expansion happen again and again, but you don't have to, and you're not dependent on forcing everyone else or anyone else to change. And that's, again, a big part of the value add.
Did you get that follow-up from Maxwell? Does Tonkean improve legal process to track performance for the rest of the organization?
Well, I think that's part of the visibility question, right? So if you have visibility, then now you have better tracking. If you think about legal, this is something we've heard so many times, because so much of the work actually ends up being in an email inbox, and a lot of the work is, not only internal but also external. It's really hard to track, and it's really hard to manage too. And the work, especially for corporate legal, is not as transactional, and therefore it's not sort of like task based and so on. And so there's a very flexible sort of unstructured work that happens. And when you have something like Tonkean that actually enable you to automate part of the work, but even if it's not automating the work itself and only automate the coordination and handoff, you still have that technology basically shepherding the work, and so therefore has the context and visibility into what happens. That allows you to build something like I talked to briefly before, like a live report in Tonkean that gives you visibility into everything that goes through this process, have aggregation on top of it. How long does it take us to handle different type of matters, for example, or how long or how many are high priority, low priority, high risk, low risk, whatever business metrics I care about, but as well as impacting other departments. Because if you think about on a high level, if you want to measure your sales velocity, and if you're only measuring the conversion between marketing and sales, and you're not taking into account the paper process and how long does that take, then if you're a CFO or a COO or a CRO, you're actually in the dark. And the ability for legal to provide that visibility outside is going to win a lot of organizational points for legal to be able to be an enabler for that sort of visibility in driving the business forward. Hopefully that answers the question.
Just checking. Looks like Maxwell is jumping in again. Okay. It looks like thanks, Maxwell. Thanks for all the interaction, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks to the attendees. Thanks for giving us your time today. And Sagi, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and Tonkean coming, sharing your experience, and bringing us on a journey to show us what their product's about. Because we have been hearing a lot about it, and just wanted to kind of showcase it to everybody. If anybody has any questions, they can reach out to you, Sagi.
Yeah, absolutely. My email is on the screen. Feel free, and happy to have the team shows demos as well. Like you got Colin, and we want to help and partner companies, obviously, and we think we have something new that is different and has a lot of value. And so definitely check us out in the website and have any questions. And it's super exciting to start a relationship calling with you and legal operators. So Thank you for the time and thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, and thank you. And I'd say to anyone, download the ebook. It's 5 Ways to Minimize Change Management. One of the biggest things in legal. And then join our legal product demo for it's worth doing the demo to get bigger insights. And listen, thanks everybody. I look forward to if you want to catch up with Tonkean, they're going to be at Clock. If you want to demo at Clock, they're going to be there. When is that? Next week?
I think so. Yeah.
Next week, and you're going to be presenting on a use case with Google as well. So
Correct.
if they want more information, they can check there. Listen, everybody, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you, everyone.